Hello and welcome to News Today. My name is Kimini Nyamani. I'm coming up over the next 60 minutes. Supreme Court dismisses application for injunction on restraining the Electoral Commission from proceeding with district assembly elections in the Lower Manya Krobo. Ahead in sports, ex-Black Stars captain Stephen Appiah says Ghana must be ready to face any opposition at next year's World Cup in Brazil. Also ahead in business. This is News Today. A Ministry of Health investigation has confirmed the some 130 million condoms worth $6 million imported by the Ghana Health Service is indeed fake. The investigations, however, also revealed that 18 million of the condoms had already been distributed at the time it was detected. The minister has subsequently assured that all persons implicated in the procurement of the condom will soon face the full rigors of the law.
The 130 million Be Safe male condoms were procured with monies from the Global Fund and was part of the Ghana Health Services strategy in combating HIV and AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases in the country. But the Food and Drugs Authority detected that the condoms were faked and about 18 million pieces had already been distributed on the market. The fake condoms is feared may have led to an increase in the rate of sexually transmitted diseases and unwanted pregnancies. The 7-member committee, which was set up by the Ministry of Health to investigate the procurement process and distribution of the product, in its final report, identified several lapses in the procurement and distribution of health commodities, medicines and medical equipment, it says, was largely responsible for the failure. It has therefore recommended a policy review to address the institutional and functional aspects of the supply and procurement process within the ministry.
We have recommended that the ministry seeks for a full refund of the money involved, that where crimes have been committed, they should look at using the appropriate means to ensure that people are brought to book. But important that the system is strengthened, that we run a transparent system whereby we see how procurement goes and we ensure that Ghanaians feel safe and assured when they use medicines, medical products like condoms and gloves, one may add, and all other things.
Sector Minister Shariati assured the recommendations by the committee would be fully implemented.
At least I can say that from the Ministry of Health, we are not going to accept replacements. The supplier will have to refund every money to this country. And we will ensure, if we have to go to international court to get our money, we can go back on international tender and then get another supply. For the criminality of the report, we will rely on the Attorney General to advise us on those who need to be criminally prosecuted. And I think that we will stand by the recommendations of the committee.
The United Nations agencies represented at the presentation of the report expressed great concern about the issue and called on government to act immediately.
The UN agencies stand ready to work with the government of Ghana in terms of, one, working on getting the pre-qualified suppliers according to the guidelines of the WHO and UNFPA, so the UN system is ready for that. And in terms of any other support that they might want, looking at procurement processes, looking at quality assurance, the UN system is here to work with the government in implementing those recommendations.
Copies of the report were also made available to the Attorney General's Department for prosecution of all culprits in the matter to immediately start.
Kofi Amor, Vice President of the Association of Persons Living with HIV and AIDS, has joined us over the telephone. Let's have the association's take on this quickly. Hello, Kofi.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us on News Today. What is the association's take on the turnout of these fake condoms?
In a way, the association have been talking about this issue, and I think it has been resolved in the sense that we are promoting condom use, and if the condom is not up to its standard, I think it worries us not only on HIV, like family planning and STIs and so on and so forth. So I know the government has able to retrieve, or not all those went out, but able to retrieve some of them. And USAID has just given us some to replace quotas.
But Kofi, has the issue been resolved? Because if you ask me, 18 million of these condoms have already been distributed. Although we cannot tell how many people have really used it, people may have used it. Really,
people may have used it, but I think all is due to the negligence of those who are in charge of it. So, yeah. So,
and the association does not think, something could be done? I mean, we know of people who are HIV positive but have partners who are not. And if such a person wanted to prevent transferring this to the partner and decided to use this condom in question, there is a problem, isn't there?
It is, but we have had so many press releases and press conferences on that issue, and the government has taken it up. So I think some of them is in the market already, and some of them to have been retrieved. So I think the government is doing all so that it's able to retrieve those ones that have gone up.
Obviously, Kofi. But let me ask you a quick question. Have any of your members, complained about having used this Be Safe condom?
I can't tell how many people have been used the Be Safe condom.
No, I'm not talking about the whole of the country. Your members.
Sure, our members do complain, and we have press releases on all these issues. So government has able to address that issue for us as a network of persons living to HIV and AIDS.
I see. Kofi, we'll leave it here for now. Kofi Amofa is president of the Association of Persons Living with HIV and AIDS. Now, the Ghana Political Parties Program of the Institute of Economic Affairs is proposing the establishment of a collation center for use in successive elections. The center, according to the group, will enhance the transparency of results collated from the various polling stations during elections. The Institute of Economic Affairs itself is also asking the Electoral Commission not to review constituency boundaries in an election year. The suggestions form part of proposals for a review of the country's electoral system.
Through successful workshops, the Institute of Economic Affairs Ghana Political Parties Program, IEAGPPP, has presented its proposal for electoral reforms to the media. The 18-point proposal called on the Electoral Commission to, among others, be transparent in its relations with political parties and the public. It also called for joint training programs for election officials, party agents, and security agencies.
The training be conducted by civil society organizations with capacity in election management and administration in consultation with the Electoral Commission over a period of 2 years. There must be a fixed number of constituencies to be reviewed periodically in accordance with the law and in line with population movements. However, that there should be no review of constituency boundaries in an election year. There should be transparency in the recruitment process of temporary electoral officials with minimum educational qualifications appropriate to each level of responsibility.
The group also wants the EC to maintain and enforce its no verification, no vote regulation.
This means that there must be authentication of fingerprints before a person is allowed to vote. However, every effort should be made to improve upon the equipment and technology. There should be a national collation center which should be open and accessible to as many members of the political parties, the media, civil society organizations, and election observers as possible, but under controlled security in order to enhance the transparency of the National Coalition exercise.
General Secretary of the NDC, Johnson Esiedo Nketia, who spoke on behalf of the political parties, said the parties are ready to abide by the proposal if adopted.
This is a document that is the product of the joint effort of all the political parties. On behalf of the members of the Ghana's political parties program, I want to say that we back these recommendations fully.
The IEAGPPP, after the media interaction, presented their proposal to the EC, although top officials of the Commission were not available for a discussion. Dorcas and Commerce report for Joy News.
The newly sworn-in National Youth Coordinator of the National Youth Authority, Ras Mubarak, is proposing a reduction in the voting age from 18 to 16. According to him, he believes the move will empower more young people to be part of the decision-making process of who leads them. Ras Mubarak said the alienation of the youth in the electoral process discourages them from contributing to national issues. Here's Ras Mubarak, and like you heard, he's National Coordinator for the National Youth Authority. Come again?
Acting National Coordinator.
Acting National Coordinator.
That's right.
So we are waiting for approval.
Well, basically, I'm good to go.
You're good to go.
I got sworn in yesterday, and it's been exciting. There's a lot of things that we need to do. I mean, youth issues are a global issue. Youth problems pose national security threats to so many countries. So it's important for us to keep our eyes on the ball, keep the young people busy, empower them to be competitive. I mean, it's a globalized world. We are not competing amongst ourselves, but we should be thinking about how we can outpace South Africa, how we can outpace Nigeria, how we can outpace the Ivory Coast in the area of cocoa production and so on and so forth. And for us to be able to do all of these things, young people need to be trained. They need to be given the skills that would make them eligible to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And I am hoping that under my watch as acting national coordinator of the National Youth Authority, all of us would work together, because the job of keeping young people busy does not rest with any one president. We are all stakeholders. Imagine if there are many young people who don't get access to jobs and opportunities. It would spell doom for all of us. So we would like to see industry taking an important and a front role position in addressing youth issues. And one of the things that I really want to do is to make a very passionate appeal to industry and all employers. When they are recruiting people, most of them do not advertise. We should be fighting for equal opportunity. Because when you don't advertise employment opportunities, the people who have finished polytechnics and universities don't get to hear about these appointments, and they don't get a fair chance at life. So let's advertise, and let's also look at employment practices, recruitment practices. Because if you go looking for a job, they tell you work experience. Now, how do you get work experience if you don't have a job? So there's got to be a paradigm shift in employment practices, and it will take all of us.
We tried that. We tried that with Jeddah. Look at where it ended.
Well, I mean, it's an entirely different thing, and I do not want to go there because it does not fall. It
would take us off the matter we intend to discuss this afternoon.
But I sincerely believe that the solutions have to be new, because the problems are old, and we all cannot sit on our hands and expect the problems to be solved. And indeed, the media is key. We want to see more and more discussions on youth issues and problems, how we can address youth poverty, how we can address youth employment, and so on and so forth. And I believe that young people are eager to work. They don't like to idle, because young people know that the devil finds work for idle hands, and they are eager for opportunities.
Right.
But all of us would have to do our bits to get them busy.
Let's narrow down on the issue of your call for the voting age to be reduced to 16. And I'm just going to quote from what I have here. It says that you believe that it will empower more young people to be part of the decision-making process, because you believe the alienation of the youth in the electoral process discourages them from contributing to national issues. So we're looking at people from 16, 17, because 18 are already part of the
vote,
process.
You know, and because of our definition of youth.
Are they ready?
They are quite ready.
Young
people have access to information. They have access to technology. And the things we see today are not the things we saw 20, 30 years back. You know, and it's important to engage all of these young people, you know, because it is only through engagement with them that we can get them to feel that they are part of the democratic process. I mean, if you are good enough, because according to the Labour Act, you can do light work at age 15.
Right.
And if you're working at 15, you pay taxes. If you are paying taxes, shouldn't you have a say on who becomes leader of your country? And because of the sense of disenchantment amongst young people, it is important to feel that it's not just a bunch of old people who are making decisions for them. I mean, it will pump into them a sense of civic duty and responsibility. And at a very younger age of 16, they obviously, by the time they become really and fully mature, would embrace democracy wholeheartedly.
But tell me something. What's the relationship between a child working, or a teenager working at 15, and your voting rights?
There's nothing that says that, I mean, you're not intelligent if you're 16 or 17. There's absolutely nothing that says that. So what it means is that younger people who are 16 and 17 are also intelligent to make decisions on how the policies affect their lives. And for me, it will mean a lot to them. Already we keep claiming that young people get through and vote. So if we are claiming that people who are less than 18 years old get the opportunity of voting, why don't we legitimize it anyway?
What?
Besides, they are old enough to know the differences because they have access to information and so on and so forth. You know, and it would be a nice.
How do you know? How do you know that? You know, the fact that the child is working means that
we don't even call them, you know, child. I mean, if they are working, obviously they wouldn't be called. They should be called adults. I mean, they should be called youth, and not children, because the laws of Ghana does not allow children, you know, to work. That is why I'm not saying 10-year-olds.
But it allows 15-year-olds.
It allows 15-year-olds
to engage in light work.
Work that doesn't hurt their health. Work that doesn't take them away from school and so on and so forth. And the general idea is that if they are good enough to work and earn a living, if we are good, if they are adults enough to work, why must it be difficult that we will give them an opportunity to have a say on who uses their tax monies?
What difference would it make if we have the 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds vote? What difference would it make?
It will mean a lot to young people who feel a sense of disillusionment, who feel it is the adults who are.
You're using a lot of words. How do you know that these 15-year-olds, because they are not voting,
because we
they feel
engage
disillusioned?
Because we engage them. Because we, you know, before I was sworn in yesterday, I had met a lot of youth groups. We have read reports on, you know, the sense of disillusionment on the part of young people who feel, well, it is the elderly people.
Has the authority conducted any study in this regard?
Well, registered youth groups have conducted studies amongst various youth groups across the country, and they think that young people are not given a voice enough. You know, and I sincerely believe that if we want to give meaning to the mantra of empowering young people, to the mantra of getting young people involved, this should be one of the things we have to look at, amongst other things like employment and training.
I see. I take it as this would be one of those things you would be taking on as acting national coordinator for the Youth Authority. Tell us how you intend to go about it.
Well, I mean, we would have to engage everybody, you know, and engage civil society, engage the various stakeholders, political parties. You know, let's all bring ideas together, engage the young people. We want to hear more from the young people, the 16 and 17-year-olds. They are key. They are not just, you know, the leaders of tomorrow, but they are the leaders of today. That is why it is important that they get to have a say in some of these things. And
we'll leave it here. Thank you very much for passing through.
Many thanks indeed. And we are counting on the media to support our cause towards empowering young people in this country.
And we will do our best.
Thank you very much.
Ras Mubarak is acting national coordinator for the National Youth Authority. Let's go to Manya Krobo now, where the Supreme Court has dismissed an application for injunction filed by some residents of Osudoku District, restraining the Electoral Commission from proceeding with District Assembly elections in the Lower Manya Krobo next week. The court, presided over by Justice William Matuguba, explained that the EC can organize the District Assembly elections on the strength of LI 1983, which places Akuse in the Lower Manya Krobo district of the Eastern region. The court's decision brings a long-standing boundary dispute between the Greater Accra and the Eastern regions on the geographical location of Lower Manya Krobo to a close, paving the way for assembly elections that have been on hold since 2010. Now, women are still being subjected to many forms of violence despite several years of activism against the phenomenon. Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, Anna Oye Lisa, is therefore calling on men to support the campaign against women bashing. She was speaking at the launch of this year's 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence in Accra.
Statistics of reported cases of sexual and domestic violence cases, according to officials, still indicate high numbers of women are being subjected to abuse.
Sexual assault cases from only 3 out of the 10 regions in Ghana at DOFSU for 2012 indicates the following. For Greater Accra, it was 5,389. Central Region, 2,673. Ashanti Region, 2,370. These are the highest recording regions, and put together is a total of 10,432 cases of sexual assault cases reported in only 3 out of the 10 regions in Ghana.
Previous advocacy campaigns have focused more on female activists, with men playing more of an indirect role. But activists say evidence from other parts of the world suggests working with men as partners is critical.
When we work with men to address sexual and gender-based violence, it is important in order to change behavior, to get men's assistance in strengthening community institutions, and to get men involved in promoting women's equality, leadership, and everlasting peace. Because if men appreciate sexual and gender-based violence, they are less likely to reject their partners who may have been raped and sexually abused.
The ministry, in collaboration with the UN systems, civil society and other stakeholders, is therefore in the process of redesigning programs and strategies that focus on how to effectively engage men and boys at various levels in the country.
We believe that men listen to what other men say, and it is strategic to use these mechanisms to mount positive pressure on men. This is important within the Ghanaian context because over 51% of the cases reported to DOFSU involve negligence and non-maintenance on the part of fathers.
This year's 16-day activism campaign is themed Ending Sexual and Gender-Based Violence, the Role of Men and Boys.
South African President Jacob Zuma and his wife Bongi Ngema Zuma left Accra this morning after a 3-day state visit to Ghana.
The visit of the South African president and his delegation saw a number of agreements on transportation and electricity supply signed between the two countries. At a joint media briefing addressed by President Mahama and President Zuma Tuesday, the two leaders discussed ways they could improve on trade between them and also discuss ways of joining forces to deal with the pockets of conflicts on the continent. Before leaving for South Africa, the two leaders issued a communique. Ghana's Foreign Minister Hannah Tete read the communique.
The visit was aimed at consolidating and further strengthening the excellent and cordial relations that exist between Ghana and South Africa. The two heads of state observed the signing of the following agreements and memoranda of understanding between Ghana and South Africa: the Bilateral Air Services Agreement, the MOU in cooperation in transport-related matters, MOU on cooperation in the field of electricity, and the MOU between the Ghana Standards Authority and the South African Bureau of Standards, and have urged their relevant ministries to take the necessary measures to implement the agreements and memoranda of understanding.
You're watching News Today. There's more ahead. Don't go away. You're welcome back to News Today. Now, the Ghana Union of Traders Association is asking government to, as a matter of urgency, scrap the recently introduced special imports levy and the increase in VAT. According to Guta president, the strategy adopted by government as a form of revenue generation is unjustifiable and contributes to a high cost of doing business in Ghana.
President of the association, George Kweku Ofori, told journalists poor systems of operations at the port is one of the reasons why government is unable to generate enough revenue at the port, adding the introduction of the taxes will rather push local traders out of business, thereby affecting economic growth.
The recently introduced additional special tax of 2% on imports based on the CIF value. We see this increase also in the VAT rate as also not necessary. To meet government expenditure is not only unjustifiable, but also very inimical to doing business in the country because it adds to the unnecessary cost of doing business, which we have been complaining all this while, thereby weakening the financial resources of the business community, especially our working capital.
The union further made recommendations to the government and other stakeholders to address the current economic crisis facing the country.
The budgetary allocation to some of these state establishments are over-bloated. We see this as a total waste and blatant abuse of our national resources, as has been reflecting in the Auditor General's reports. It is therefore our fervent hope and belief that all public and civil servants, as well as their collaborators who are found culpable in any form of malfeasance, especially which leads to financial loss to the state, should not only be dismissed from work, but should also be prosecuted or retrieve all the lost funds, even if it means confiscating their assets and bank accounts to the state. If these areas are effectively checked, government can equally make a lot of savings of huge sums of money, which can also be deemed as a source of revenue to the state.
They, however, cautioned government to immediately heed their calls or they would advise themselves no matter the consequences.
A private enterprise consultant, Augustine Adungo, is asking government to put in place measures to address issues relating to funding of SMEs in the country. According to him, funds allocated for small and medium enterprises in the budget should help target the poor infrastructural system in the country.
This SME fund, when I read it, I said, come on, what are we doing here? We're going to rob Peter to pay Paul? There is a fund, the EDIF, Export Development Agricultural Investment Fund. Muslock. We're going to take 50 million to set up a new fund. And guess what? We're going to take part of that money from EDIF. We are robbing EDIF in order to set up the SME fund. That really is not the issue. The issue is address these challenges on both ends of the equation. And guess what? The monies will flow. The bankers, apart from just the banks, there are other people who are sitting on monies, who want to be able to invest those monies and make very good returns. Clear the environment, address the challenges that the SMEs face, address the lack of tools, innovative products that the bankers are faced with, the money will flow.
Now, Youth Economic Dialogue has commended government for proposing to set up a 50 million Ghana cedi SME fund to address limited access to financing and reducing the cost of borrowing by small and medium enterprises in Ghana. It notes there's growing amount of evidence that the most serious obstacle hindering the growth and development of small and medium enterprises is the cost of credit. While agreeing that this initiative is in the right direction, the group wishes to draw government's attention to its abysmal track record of effective implementation of such programs and policies since the days of Economic Recovery Program and Structural Adjustment Program. Nanaya Educhum is Country Director, Youth Economic Dialogue, is here with me in the studio. We'll try and understand how this could change the face of doing SME business here in the country. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right. We've spoken about government's abysmal performance when it comes to effecting or implementing such programs like the fund.
Yeah.
What would you recommend government does this time?
This time around, we believe that government should learn lessons from the implementation of Business Assistance Fund, which was similar to the proposal that's contained in the budget statement. If you look at that fund, our analysis showed that most of the money went to party supporters, and therefore they thought that it was a handout, and therefore they didn't need to pay back. This is a fund we believe that government should not set up a different structure to run or implement that fund. However, government should partner private banks. For example, commercial bank is a national bank, ADB is a national bank. Government can work with the rural bank or the apex body of the rural bank. They are across the country for the implementation and disbursement of the fund. We also believe that capacity and lack of access to logistics is one of the major underpinning problems. So in giving out credit, you don't rather give cash. Government can hire consultants to build the capacities of these SMEs and support them with, for example, capital. We also think that the lessons that we learned with the implementation of MASLOC, and I must emphasize that the MASLOC was actually targeting individuals, not businesses. We believe we have not read the concept paper behind this proposal. However, we think that it is targeted at entrepreneurs, and therefore government should rather work based on proposals presented by businesses, not individuals who have access to power who can lobby for such funds. And we should also ensure that repayment should be part of the project discretion. So when I go in for that amount of money, I know that I've gone in for a commercial loan and therefore I will pay. We believe that it should be at the interest-free, although but it should be paid back so that the money can be redistributed and the multiplier effect will be greater.
With the issue of government working with banks such as the Commercial Bank, Ghana Commercial Bank, I beg your pardon, ADB and the rural banks, is government not already doing that?
Yeah, there are lots of projects that government is doing with these same banks. For example, the Rural Enterprises Project, which is a two-pronged. Government is working, improving the capacity of rural enterprises and also giving them access to logistics and cash or capital input. But the difference is that this government is, I believe, is trying to target SMEs across board. So SMEs located in commercial areas, big urban centers can also be beneficiary of this facility. So the lessons should be learned. But if you also look at the Skills Development Fund, we went from a loan to build the capacities of most SME civil societies and other organizations trying to create some commercial activities or commodities. But the disbursement has always been the issue. Our record in disbursement has been abysmal, as we stated. I can refer you to MASLOC, I can refer you to business advisory services. People go for loan, a matching grant, they don't want to pay part of their money, but they don't want to even ensure that the consultant implement the programs that he has proposed to implement. So effective implementation is the problem. However, we cannot work, government shouldn't be interested in rolling out that project by itself, because I can tell you that will be a total failure from the start.
Should government set up an entirely new?
No.
How should the distribution go about?
This distribution can be done with the private banks. All that government must do is government say...
We mustn't go through Maslow this time.
No, of course not. We shouldn't set up a new bureaucratic institution. We don't need that. As I said, the commercial bank is everywhere. Government can work with commercial bank. And commercial bank has SME desks. All government is doing is to giving commercial bank an amount of that money that disburse it to these sectors. And the sectors should be selected by government because government knows its priorities. And government knows where we can generate growth, create jobs. SMEs that should support us to do that. So commercial bank will just be there for two things in my view, for disbursement and recovery.
I'm happy you mentioned government should select the sectors from where to support the SMEs. What would be your advice to government when it comes to selecting the SMEs?
Yeah, we would say that we should look at agriculture, for example. So agribusiness is very important. It creates a lot of jobs. All enterprises that has long value chain. As you go on the value chain, you create jobs. Because jobs, we need jobs. We need to create jobs. We need to create opportunities for our people to optimize. So I believe that agribusiness is one of them. Some cottage industries involving processing, like soap manufacturing, we can do that. But however, we should also ensure that we develop our infrastructure because it's very important.
How important is that to the SME business, retargeting poor infrastructural systems and making it better? How important is that to SME?
It is very critical because the contribution of weak infrastructure to the cost of doing business in Ghana is very significant if you compare it to those in advanced countries. Besides the fact that our interest rate is high, I think the next in the cost build-up is it costs so much to move one product from one point to the other, and cost of access to these infrastructure services are very, very huge.
Which also means that infrastructure here could be sector-specific.
Sector-specific. And I think that we here in this context, we should be looking at telecommunication roles. We should also look at our airports a bit because we should create a facility where you can, for example, fly your finished product from Kumasi to Accra within 45 minutes. So that is very critical.
Thank you very much, Nana, for this information you've shared with us. Nana Yao Educhum is Country Director for Youth Economic Dialogue, and we've been discussing how the implementation of a 50 million Ghana cedi SME fund captured in the 2014 budget, how we should go about it. To move on to some, and then members of the Association of Trainees in Colleges of the Northern Sector Tuesday afternoon embarked on a demonstration in the Upper East Regional Capital, Bolgatanga, to protest against government's decision to scrap the teacher trainee allowance. The allowance is expected to be replaced with a student's loan scheme.
According to the teacher trainees, they would rather have their allowances reduced by half instead of being scrapped totally.
Tertiary students who take loans are employed at places of their choices. But in our case, we are posted to very deprived communities under very harsh conditions. Because of the allowances, we are bound to accept these postings. Your Excellency, even though the colleges of education are now tertiary institutions, we believe our tertiary is a unique type of tertiary because of the strict moral and social training component of our course. Therefore, it will be inappropriate to equate our tertiary to the abolition of this allowance scheme.
The demonstrators who wore red ribbons marched through the streets of Bolgatanga, singing protest songs and carrying placards with various inscriptions to register their displeasure at government's decision. Northern Sector President of Achekont, Mbugri Solomon Deduk, addressed the media.
Taking into consideration the historical antecedents that led to the implementation of this allowance scheme and the positive effect it has had on teacher education in particular and basic education in general over the years, we strongly believe it will not be in the interest of our dear nation for this scheme to be abolished. We believe government's only excuse for which it is not ready to listen to us is the fact that there is increment in the colleges of education admission quota. But we equally believe that the government cannot prove that there is over 100% increment in the national quota. This, therefore, is a clear of the doubt. We are suggesting to the government that it can only strike down the allowances by half and not to scrap it to cater for the intake.
The teacher trainees later marched to the Upper East Regional Coordinating Council, where they presented a petition to the Regional Minister for onward delivery to the President.
Now, Time for sports news brought to you by Tigo. When I come back, to have landed himself in trouble this time round with his new music video. Information reaching showbiz indicates the rapper will soon be hauled before the Bureau of National Investigation to answer questions on his use of the president's image in his new video, Don't Call Me.
Oh, Mr. Presido, Mobo Ghana, don't call me. If you know the kitty, if you know the pay your water bill, go to the terrace. If you know the kitty, if you know the pay your water bill.
The video that is likely to earn Burma Sydney an invitation to the offices of the BNI, alongside with the director of the video, Mark Lord Ice, is produced by Eagle Sight Production, and the title is Don't Call Me. In the yet-to-be-released video, secured by Showbiz, Sydney is seated with Preston Mahama at the Flagstaff House and asking him questions about the controversial Ghana Youth Employment and Entrepreneurial Development Agency, or JIDA report, the sale of GNPC's drill ship, Discover 511, and the recent sale of Merchant Bank to Forties, a deal many have questioned. Don't Call Me has got many asking questions already, questions Burma Sydney himself may have to provide answers to, either voluntarily or at the BNI's offices, as the rumors suggest.
You know the fish swagging or campaign time to show love. Press the door, shine your eyes, people they chop wanna do. Go, or you need to go, roll the teacher, go to out, system high, day in and day out, people the hustle, light bills, out, water bills, out, heat, transport, out, when I salary, down, press the door, all be that too. This is the word on the street, very much, voice of the voiceless, I'm that.
This is news today, our top stories for the Zara. Supreme Court dismisses an application for injunction filed by some residents of Osudoko District restraining the Electoral Commission from proceeding with District Assembly elections in the Manya Krobo next week. Ex-Black Stars captain Stephen Appiah says Ghana must be ready to face any opposition at next year's World Cup in Brazil. Goodbye.